Number 1.
Gifford was last seen leaving the Pelican Bar, a tiki bar in the 40 block of Windjammer Lane at Windmill Point Marina in Whitestone, Virginia, sometime between 6:30 and 8:30 p.m. on July 6, 2014. She was accompanied by James Todd Kessler, who usually goes by his middle name. At the time, he was her boyfriend. They'd been dating casually for about 2 months. He was separated from his wife and in the process of a divorce, and Gifford was estranged from her husband, who lived in Orlando, Florida with their teenage daughter. She'd moved to Virginia in 2013. A photo of Kessler is posted below this case summary. According to witnesses, on the night of her disappearance Gifford only had 2 or 3 drinks, but when she left the Pelican Bar she was so drunk that Kessler had to carry her out of the bar to his Nissan's Terra. Kessler said he helped her get into his car and started driving home, but she got angry because she wanted to keep drinking, and after less than a mile she tried to jump out. He stopped and let her out, and she walked away. At one point, Kessler claimed 4 men helped Gifford into a silver Nissan SUV after he let her out of his car. Gifford was reported missing on July 7, and her loved ones feared from the beginning that she had come to harm, but Kessler acted unconcerned. According to others, Gifford and Kessler had a troubled relationship, and he drank heavily and was addicted to cocaine. When Gifford went back to Florida for 2 weeks to visit her family, Kessler called her incessantly, demanding she return to Virginia, and even called her husband to try to get her to come back. After Gifford disappeared, Kessler claimed he'd gotten a message from her saying she was moving to North Carolina and asking her to pack her clothes in her suitcase and leave it on the front porch of his house on the banks of Corodaman Creek in Kilmarnock, Virginia. He said he did as she asked, and the suitcase was picked up. Gifford's best friend claims she got a text from Gifford's phone that intimated she was leaving the area. It stated she had messed up but had gotten a job in South Carolina. Just minutes after receiving the text, Gifford's friend got a call from Kessler, who said he thought Gifford had run off to South Carolina with a businessman. Her friend didn't believe Gifford had actually sent the text and immediately suspected Kessler was involved in her disappearance. Gifford didn't have a permanent address in Virginia and stayed in friends' homes and in various hotels. She had held a job at a Kilmarnock hotel and was a good employee, but quit shortly before her disappearance. Her friends describe her as a quiet and very private person. She was depressed because her dog had died and she missed her daughter and had seen a counselor. She didn't want to return to her husband and had spoken of bringing her daughter to Virginia to live with her, but her friends encouraged her to return to Orlando and make a home there for herself and her child, and she was making plans to do that. Witnesses noted Kessler's right forearm was badly bruised and swollen after Gifford disappeared. He said she had slammed the door on his hand that night. He also had other bruises on his body and small puncture wounds on his arm. He said he'd fallen while skiing and hurt his arm while cutting brush on his property. When police searched his vehicle, they found Gifford's blood on the front passenger seat and front passenger side door. They also found small amounts of blood in various places throughout his Kilmarnock residence, and in the laundry basket a red shirt, which Kessler said was the one he'd worn at the bar the night Gifford disappeared. After police pointed out the bloodstains on it, Kessler said he'd been mistaken and had actually worn another shirt. The blood was later determined to be Gifford's. Kessler said the bloodstains in his car came from when Gifford struggled with her seatbelt and ripped off her fingernail on the night of her disappearance, and the bloodstains at his residence came from his 2 dogs and from a time when Gifford accidentally tripped and hit her face on a barbecue grill. Police stated there were contradictions in many of the statements he made. Extensive searches of the northern neck area of Virginia, where Gifford disappeared, turned up no sign of her. On July 19, less than 2 weeks after Gifford's disappearance, Kessler was in the Pelican Bar again and met a married couple who knew him and Gifford slightly. They started talking about her disappearance, and the wife speculated that she was still alive. Kessler slammed his drink down and angrily said she was dead, then left the bar. He later returned and got into a fight with the couple outside the bar. The husband was seriously injured and had to be hospitalized for a week. Kessler was arrested and jailed as a result, charged with misdemeanor assault and battery and felony malicious wounding. In March 2015, while still in jail, he was charged with first-degree murder and malicious concealment of a dead body in Gifford's case. Kessler had been drinking with her at the bar the night Gifford disappeared, and authorities believe, based on the residue on his blood-stained red shirt, that he was also under the influence of cocaine. They theorized he beat and strangled her to death after she told him she was leaving, put her body in a green and blue cloth wardrobe suitcase, weighted it with chunks of concrete, and dumped it in one of the many waterways in the local area. Cellular phone records showed Gifford's phone was in the area around Kessler's family home on the night of July 6, not in the area of Windmill Point Marina, where he said he dropped her off. The next day, during the morning and early afternoon hours, her phone was inactive for several hours, while his phone remained active and moved from his family home to a nearby cabin owned by his family, where there was a dock and a small boat. Both phones were later active and in the areas around the home and marina. Kessler was seen power washing the dock at the cabin, and at least one witness saw the crumbled remains of concrete blocks there. Kessler maintained his innocence at trial and testified in his defense, saying he had loved Gifford and hoped to marry her, and that he was trying to get her to stop drinking. He denied having worn the red shirt with the blood and cocaine residue, but the prosecution produced a photo taken in the bar that night which showed him wearing it. Kessler said he believed Gifford was still alive. His defense argued Gifford might have left of her own accord and changed her identity. They produced witnesses had supposedly seen her after her disappearance. The prosecution had no hard evidence as to how and where she met her death or where her body was, and investigators didn't collect the blood evidence they found in his house, so they couldn't prove it was Gifford's. The defense argued the entire case was conjecture and speculation and there was no proof Gifford was dead. In August 2015, after just 3 hours of jury deliberation, Kessler was found guilty of second-degree murder. The prosecution had previously offered to let him plead guilty to that charge and reveal the whereabouts of Gifford's body in exchange for a 20-year sentence, but he'd refused. The jury recommended a 40-year sentence for the murder, almost double the maximum state sentencing recommendation for that offense, and 5 years for concealment of the body. Foul play is suspected in Gifford's disappearance due to the circumstances involved.
Number 2.
While at her job as a dispatcher on September 27, Toni awaited a phone call from her daughter, letting her know she'd gotten home safely. Normally, Keeshae would call during Toni's lunch break, which usually fell between 11 a.m. and 12 p.m. However, no call came. Worried, she called Keeshae's cell phone, but it went straight to voicemail. She then called Devon, who told her the last time he'd spoken to his sister was the previous night. When Toni returned home that evening, she noticed Keeshae still wasn't there. Worried, she called her daughter's friends and visited their houses, but there was no sign of her. Around 2 a.m. on September 28, after speaking with her sister, Toni contacted the Richmond Police Department to report Keeshae as missing, citing it was uncharacteristic for her daughter to leave without notice. The beginning of the search for Keeshae involved her friends and Toni going door to door in her neighborhood, asking if anyone had seen her. It was during this search that Toni was informed that her daughter's friends had been with Keeshae the night she disappeared, something they'd previously denied. When pushed for information, they explained that they'd dropped her off in Churchill to meet someone, about 10 minutes from her house. However, they did not know who the person was. One specific friend, DeMarcus Hunt, shared that he was the one who drove her to the unknown male's house. He was under the impression that Keeshae would be meeting a mutual female friend there, which he claimed was later confirmed upon receiving a text from said friend. However, that was disputed by the female friend upon her being questioned by police, with her claiming to have never sent the text. After talking to DeMarcus, Toni drove to the man's house, where he offered up numerous accounts about the night of September 26. While he admitted to knowing Keeshae and seeing her that night, he claimed she had called for a ride not long after arriving and left. Toni then called the police, who searched the house, but were unable to find any signs of Keeshae. Due to the ongoing nature of the investigation, the identities of the female friend and unknown male have not been publicly released. Upon discovering Keeshae's last known location, investigators got to work searching the Churchill area, which they did multiple times. They canvassed the area and handed out flyers. A look into Keeshae's cell phone records showed it had been off since the night of her disappearance. As well, her bank account remained untouched, and her email and Facebook account were inactive. Investigators have yet to recover her cell phone, ID or the overnight bag she brought with her that night. In order to help bring in new leads, her family and friends raised $3,000 for a reward for information leading to the arrest and conviction of anyone involved in her disappearance. There have been numerous reported sightings of Keeshae, but nothing investigators have been able to verify. However, they believe she didn't run away or move to another state. Throughout the search for her daughter, Tony has been subjected to numerous prank phone calls and fake social media messages, all from people claiming to either be Keeshae or know where she is. Both Tony and those investigating the case have said precious time has been wasted looking into these fake leads. People have also lied to store owners in the Richmond area, saying Keeshae has been found and asking them to remove her flyers from their storefronts. In January 2017, tragedy struck Tony again when Devon was murdered. The 25-year-old had been gunned down outside a local Motel 6. The man who shot him, James Henshaw, was put on trial and a jury found him guilty of second-degree murder. It is not believed Devon's murder is connected to Keeshae's disappearance. In 2018, an unidentified source claimed there is a man who has knowledge about the case and Keeshae's disappearance. He is currently serving time in prison for a violent crime against another woman. Specifically, the source said the prisoner has knowledge about Keeshae's whereabouts. However, it's unknown if he has spoken with investigators at this time. The Richmond Police Department says the case is currently at a standstill. Investigators believe there are people living in the East End, specifically in the Broad Street corridor, who have information that could help bring this case to a close. The only theory currently held in this case is that of investigators who believe Keeshae met with some form of foul play on the night she went missing. While they have not stated why they think this, it is important to note that there has been no indication that the missing woman was involved in drugs or any form of illegal activity. Tony is of the belief that her daughter is still alive and she continues to hold out hope that she'll one day return home. The family created the Help Find Keeshae Jacobs Facebook page to help keep the case in the public eye. Tony is currently working toward her associate's degree in human services at J. Sargent Reynolds Community College in Richmond. She recently accepted her certificate in substance abuse counseling, a program both her children had pushed her to sign up for back in 2015. Tony credits the Richmond Police Department and the Richmond community for helping her make it through both Keeshae's disappearance and Devon's murder. She regularly visits Maury Street Cemetery, where her son is buried. On the anniversary of Keeshae's disappearance, her family releases blue balloons as a memorial event. They have also held rallies, with one being held not far from the house where she was last seen. Through her daughter's disappearance, Tony has become an advocate for families who have lost loved ones. She partnered with the Richmond Police Department and the city's mayor, Lever Stoney, to mark Missing Persons Day each April. If you have any information regarding the case, you can contact the Richmond Police Department at 804-646-5125 or Crime Stoppers at 1-804-780-1000.
Number 3.
On November 21, 2012, Aubrey awoke to find Sage still hadn't returned to the apartment. When she tried to call her cell phone, she found it kept going straight to voicemail, which struck her as odd, since Sage constantly had her phone on her and always had its charger on hand. Worried, she contacted a few friends, which is when she learned that Sage's stepsister, Kiera Morgan, had seen her the previous night around 6:30 p.m. on Main Street, near the intersection of West Main Street and 4th Street Northwest. Kiera had been walking to the bus stop when she saw Sage talking on the phone. While she was unsure who she had been speaking with, she did recall hearing her say she'd be there in 5 minutes. Aubrey then called Cookie, who felt immediately troubled and knew something wasn't right. She told Aubrey to wait until 10 p.m. that night and to report Sage as missing if she didn't return before then. Investigation. The Charlottesville Police Department started their investigation into Sage's disappearance on November 22, 2012. They were immediately concerned about foul play, as they were aware of the sort of violence those who are transgender face, and thus worked to collect statements from her friends and family in the hopes of developing a timeline of her movements. According to Aubrey, the department hadn't actually taken the case as seriously as they let on, saying they'd only asked for Sage's name, birthday and picture. Dean was the one to inform Latasha that Sage was missing. She was nervous, as Sage always had her phone on her and would always respond to calls and messages from family. In order to not alarm her daughters, Ina and Rasha Langston, she stayed quiet about the news. Unfortunately, the girls soon learnt of their siblings' disappearance after seeing a post about it on Facebook. In order to get a better picture of Sage's movements on the night she disappeared, investigators subpoenaed her cell phone records. As the process was slated to take a few days, so the family took matters into their own hands. They guessed Sage's account password and soon accessed the records themselves, where they learned her last known contact was with an unknown person who possessed an out-of-state number. Hoping to catch a break, Dean posted the number on Facebook and was soon contacted by a person by the name of Yami Ortiz, who claimed it belonged to a man named Eric McFadden. According to Ortiz, Sage had been dating McFadden, who was not yet openly out about his sexuality. He told Dean that he and McFadden had exchanged texts and emails and had even met on multiple occasions, and that out of the blue, he'd messaged Ortiz on November 21st and asked him to delete his contact information from his phone. Despite thinking this was a bit odd, he'd thought nothing of it until he'd seen Dean's Facebook post. Dean soon learnt that Sage and McFadden had met online, most likely through one of Sage's casual encounters ads on Craigslist, and had been texting and calling each other for weeks. McFadden, who was in a relationship with a woman named Esther Aveni, had paid Sage money to keep their relationship a secret. However, it's unknown if the money exchanged was due to blackmail, prostitution, or if it is unrelated to either scenario. Ortiz provided Dean with an image of McFadden, which he then shared on Facebook. He didn't share this information with the authorities out of fear of them shutting down his own investigation into Sage's disappearance. On November 23rd, Ortiz connected McFadden and made him aware of the investigation. In the hopes of finding Sage, a group of officers conducted a grid search of Main Street and the surrounding area, which is heavily trafficked due to the nearby bus and train stations. They checked open lots, trash cans, fields, parking lots and dumpsters, and canvassed nearby businesses for surveillance footage. Unfortunately, those who had security cameras did not capture anything, and the only other camera was one that monitored traffic. On November 24th, police conducted a search of Harris Street and around the University of Virginia. That same day, they learned about the possible connection Eric McFadden had to the investigation after Esther called them and asked that they perform a welfare check. She was out of town at the time and hadn't been able to reach him, so she'd wanted them to check he wasn't incapacitated in their apartment. When they arrived at the residence on 14th Street, they found no one was home and left. Later that day, Ortiz visited the police department and told them about McFadden, their relationship and Dean's Facebook post. When they contacted McFadden's work, they found he hadn't showed up for 3 days. Police soon went public with the information about the possible link between his and Sage's disappearances. They put up posters featuring both their images and descriptions on telephone poles, convenience store counters and community bulletin boards. With Esther's consent, investigators searched the apartment, located in downtown Charlottesville. They hoped to find any fingerprints, DNA, blood or other evidence that would show Sage had recently been at the apartment. They seized McFadden's computer and while there uncovered a receipt from a nearby CVS, which showed he'd made a purchase on November 22nd, only a few days prior. This was later proven by surveillance footage from the store. This led investigators to believe he may have left town after being outed by Dean on Facebook. They spoke to Aubrey about McFadden, who told them she'd only met him briefly during an encounter on Main Street with Sage. Throughout the beginning of the investigation, the family held numerous vigils to help raise awareness about the case. Eventually, investigators were given access to Sage's cell phone records, which confirmed she'd been on call with McFadden around the time she was last seen. While the records showed her phone had been off since her disappearance, it had pinged off a tower near her apartment. However, it was noted that, given Charlottesville is a small city, the cell towers are not far apart, meaning the findings weren't conclusive. The records did show that McFadden and Sage had texted numerous times throughout the night, and from that police were able to develop a more thorough timeline for the evening of November 20. 5:17 p.m. Sage sent a text, asking McFadden when he was leaving. 5:20 p.m. McFadden responded, saying he had already left and was at the Hampton Inn. 5:17 p.m. to 5:40 p.m., the pair texted on and off. 5:40 p.m. Sage left her apartment and made her way to downtown Charlottesville. 6:08 p.m. McFadden texted Sage, asking where she was. 6:12 p.m. McFadden again inquired about Sage's whereabouts. 6:18 p.m. to 6:37 p.m. McFadden texted Sage numerous times, but as she was on a call with a friend, it's unsure if she saw these messages. 6:27 p.m. Upset, McFadden texted Sage again, claiming she'd stood him up. 6:35 p.m. Jaquier saw Sage walking down 4th Street Northwest, near the 400 block of West Main Street. 6:40 p.m. Sage walked westbound on West Main Street. On November 25, McFadden contacted Esther and told her he was in Washington, D.C. and needed money. She informed him that the police wished to speak with him and gave him their contact information. 2 days later, he called them from New York City and explained that he hadn't left the Charlottesville area because he was involved in Sage's disappearance. During the call, he confirmed he'd had a relationship with Sage and that the pair had arranged to meet in front of the Amtrak station on Main Street, but said that she'd never appeared. Investigators in Charlottesville requested McFadden travel back to town, but he immediately hung up. Later, Esther contacted them to say her boyfriend had agreed to return, so long as someone was there to pick him up from the bus station. However, an hour and a half before he was scheduled to board the bus back to Charlottesville, he emailed Esther to inform her he'd changed his mind. McFadden's strange behavior confused the family, who wondered why he wasn't cooperating with the investigation if he had nothing to hide. This led them to believe he was somehow involved. During the first week of the investigation, Cookie claims to have tried to contact investigators numerous times. It took her leaving several messages for them to return her calls. On November 28, investigators searched the streets and wooded areas along West Main Street before expanding the search to include the area around McFadden's apartment. They also held their first press conference regarding the case, where they stated it wasn't a criminal investigation, as they had no evidence to prove that anything criminal had occurred. On November 30th, police visited a trash expert who helped them to determine that the garbage in the dumpster located behind McFadden's apartment was transported to a landfill 60 miles away in Henrico County, just outside Richmond, Virginia. 3 days later, Esther came to the police department after receiving an email from McFadden where he described the night Sage went missing. This provided a different sequence of events to the one he had initially shared with investigators. According to the email, he and Sage had met up on the night in questions and when walking down the street, were approached by a group of people. Claiming Sage had enemies, he wrote that he'd walked away before anything bad could happen. This suggested that McFadden had been afraid of whomever he'd seen, but as his story had changed, police were unsure if it was the truth. The email also alleged that Sage had been blackmailing McFadden and that she'd ask for money or else she'd tell Esther that she and her boyfriend were in a secret relationship. He ended it by writing that he was heading to the Midwest and he apologized for hurting her. After learning of the email, McFadden shot to the top of the suspect list. As a result, police obtained warrants to search his computer, email accounts, social media and bank accounts, but uncovered no evidence. Police searched through Sage's social media accounts, which showed no use since the night she disappeared. Through this search, they learned that many of her previous partners were not openly gay and thus had been keeping the information on the down low. According to one friend, one of the relationships had been with a man whose girlfriend had learned of his meetings with Sage after discovering emails. The man had blamed Sage and had attacked her one night while she was walking home. The assault had resulted in charges being laid. However, it was later confirmed he had no involvement in Sage's disappearance, as he had been incarcerated at the time. On December 3, the family made a public statement wherein they questioned the city's response to Sage's disappearance, saying it hadn't gotten the attention it deserved. That same day, Aubrey was discovered using Sage's food stamp card at a local convenience store. When questioned, she told investigators that the three roommates often shared their possessions and that she had taken the card in order to purchase groceries for the apartment. This led for suspicion to grow around Aubrey, as police weren't able to confirm her alibi for the night of November 20. During December 2012, 3 major searches occurred in relation to the case. The first was a search of the areas around Main Street and McFadden's apartment, as well as around some nearby railroad tracks, with the assistance of officers from the Virginia Department of Emergency Association and cadaver dogs from the Virginia Search and Rescue Dog Association. While one of the dogs gave a slight indication that it had picked up Sage's scent, the lead went nowhere. The second search was of a sediment pond, which was scoured by a police dive team. Unfortunately, that search turned up empty. The third search was of the landfill in Henrico County. It consisted of the Charlottesville Police Department, officers from Henrico County, personnel from the forensic and hazmat teams, 2 police dogs, and a retired special agent who had extensive knowledge of landfill searches. Despite over 12 individuals walking around the landfill, nothing of interest to the case was located. Toward the end of 2012, a reward of $10,000 was supplied by an anonymous donor in the hopes of prompting more people with information about the investigation to come forward. Frustrated and of the belief that the police department wasn't taking the case seriously, the family requested to speak with the then police chief. This meeting took 9 months to occur. While waiting for the meeting, they went public with their concerns about the lack of developments in the investigation. A new eyewitness in the case came forward in February 2013, saying they'd seen Sage at a local cafe on the night she went missing. The witness, Monica Williams, contacted police to say she'd seen Sage at the Wild Wings Cafe on Main Street around 7 p.m. on the evening of November 20, 2012. According to Monica, she was alone and waiting for someone at the bar. This information caused police to re-examine their timeline, as the cafe shares a building with the Amtrak station. This led them to look into the possibility that Sage could have had enough time to meet up with McFadden before seeing Jaquier and Monica, which would mean McFadden was innocent of any wrongdoing. Unfortunately, the cafe didn't have any surveillance cameras, and when investigators spoke to the manager, they said they'd seen a group of individuals in the establishment, but weren't able to confirm, as one of them was Sage. In May 2013, investigators upped their efforts to locate Sage. They contacted the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children in the hopes of getting their assistance in getting word out about the case, and uploaded her dental records to a national registry should her body be located. 2013 was the last time Eric contacted Esther. He'd reached out to her on and off via various emails, but given he abandoned them after one use, investigators were not able to trace his movements. The family held a vigil to mark the first anniversary of Sage's disappearance. Investigators have traveled to Tidewater twice in relation to the case. The first was regarding a reported sighting of Eric, while the second was following a report that Sage had been seen in the area. The disappearance of 18-year-old Hannah Graham from Charlottesville raised concerns for Sage's family. The search for the missing girl turned out to be the largest and most expensive in Virginia's history, and Sage's family wondered why they'd not received the same support and attention from the community. They felt there was a bias toward them, given Sage's race and sexuality. Around the second anniversary of Sage's disappearance, police once again took to the streets in order to distribute flyers to local businesses and along Main Street, with a particular focus on where she was last seen. That same month, they announced that McFadden was no longer considered a suspect in the investigation, as a more thorough look at his digital footprint didn't line up with someone who had the time to commit a criminal act that night. They also stated that he hadn't the means to harm Sage, as he didn't drive or own a car, and he lived in a heavily populated area where residents would notice something out of the ordinary. In January 2016, police got a call from Chincoteague, Virginia, some 300 miles away, of a possible sighting of Sage. However, when they arrived, it turned out to be her former roommate, Jaquier. While there, they interviewed Jaquier and learned that Aubrey wasn't being completely forthcoming with what she knew. Jaquier also informed them that she had become unsettled about Aubrey using Sage's food stamp card and other personal belongings. Jaquier was also re-interviewed, which led to further suspicion falling on Aubrey. Jaquier told them that Sage and Aubrey had been in competition with each other, and that Aubrey was jealous of her roommate. When approached about these allegations, Aubrey claimed it was all a misunderstanding. However, holes in her story began to emerge. It was discovered that she'd seen McFadden more than the one time she claimed, as police learned of a meeting between them and Sage the Saturday before November 20, 2012. They also felt her behavior was indicative of someone hiding something, but she continued to claim she had told them all she knew. It should be noted that police have no evidence linking Aubrey to Sage's disappearance. Police announced in March 2017 that McFadden was once again a person of interest in the case, this time more so as a witness than as a suspect. They also announced that, as of December 2016, the case had been changed to a homicide investigation. When asked why they delayed sharing this information, they cited it was out of respect for the family. In May 2018, investigators, along with a forensic unit, took another look at Sage's old apartment. The search took several days. It's unknown if anything of interest was uncovered. McFadden's mother officially reported him as a missing person with the Charlottesville Police Department in June 2019. According to his mother, she hadn't known he was missing until 2014 and had been under the impression that his father had filed a report with police. She and McFadden's stepmother are currently under the impression he may be deceased. According to investigators, they have information that states he may be in the following cities: Baltimore, Maryland, Joppatown, Maryland, Atlanta, Georgia, Lake City, South Carolina, New York City, New York, Rochester, New York, and a variety of other areas along the West Coast. They have also shared that he may have traveled south, possibly to South Carolina or Georgia. Between June and November 2019, investigators received over a dozen tips related to the case. Over the course of the investigation, people, especially Sage's family, have been critical of how police have handled it. Aubrey claims it took investigators more than 2 weeks to interview her, and people have been critical of how long it took for the Charlottesville Police Department to request help from outside agencies. There's also the fact they didn't prevent the trash from around McFadden's apartment from being collected, despite being advised to do so. While investigators have said they've spent countless hours examining evidence and reviewing witness statements, the family has repeatedly said that those involved with the case have not been open with them, nor have they kept in contact. The department's new police chief approached them regarding this claim and acknowledged that his officers had dropped the ball. A petition has been started to encourage the police department to keep heavily investigating Sage's disappearance. It asks that investigators begin to better communicate with Cookie and requests they expand the investigation beyond its focus on McFadden. It also asks that the department publicly apologize for its mishandling of the case, especially surrounding the amount of time it took for it to be designated as a criminal investigation. Finally, it requested that the media respect the pronoun Sage went by and urged for regular meetings with the family. As of May 2020, Sage's case is still being treated as a probable homicide. Investigators have teamed up with the FBI in their search for answers, and there is currently a $20,000 reward for information.
Number 4.
On Tuesday, July 21, 2015, Jeremiah Foco, a 34-year-old engineer at Oracle's Bellevue, Washington office, was working from home. In the afternoon, he called into work to say that his laptop's hard drive had crashed and he would be in the next day to have it fixed. He never arrived. Jeremiah was described as well-liked and very social. Over the next 2 weeks, over 20 of his friends worked in shifts to get word out on social media about Jeremiah's disappearance, hand out flyers in his neighborhood, and raise money for his family members to come out to Seattle to help with the search. Jeremiah lived in the Uwajimaya Village apartments in Seattle's International District, or ID. Because Jeremiah is an adult and there was no evidence of foul play, all the police could do to gain entry to his apartment was to perform a wellness check at the request of his friends and family. The police were unable to do an extensive search, but noted that Jeremiah was absent from his apartment, along with his laptop, keys, wallet, and cell phone. The bed was made, and the apartment was in order, as if Jeremiah had left in the morning for work as usual. Uwajimaya Village Apartments allowed police to conduct a thorough search of the building, but no clues were found. The security footage of the building was released, and Jeremiah was spotted on video entering the Uwajimaya Village parking garage in his car at 12:07 a.m. on the 22nd. On July 28, 2015, there was another development. Metro Transit released a security video of a man fitting Jeremiah's description hurrying down the stairs of the International District Chinatown Transit Tunnel stop to catch the 7:02 a.m. 550 bus on the morning of July 22. The 550 was the bus Jeremiah took to and from work every day, from that platform. But while Jeremiah's friends and family thought the man on the video was a strong possible match for Jeremiah, the man never turns his face to the camera, and Jeremiah's co-workers ruled it out because the man in the video used a backpack which was different from the one Jeremiah took with him to work every day. Unfortunately, there was a glitch and the next 18 minutes of video from the station platform is missing. Also, Jeremiah's Orca card was never used on any bus or train that day. Some have speculated that instead of catching the 550, Jeremiah might have hopped onto the light rail train to SeaTac International Airport. They both stop at the same exact platform and may have used cash instead of his Orca card. However, there's no record of Jeremiah being at SeaTac that day. While Jeremiah's cell phone records have not been released for privacy reasons, as there is still no evidence of foul play, and he has not been declared legally dead, AT&T did confirm that Jeremiah's cell phone pinged a cell tower in downtown Seattle on Thursday, July 23, the day after his disappearance. Following the standard protocol for an eviction, Jeremiah Foco was evicted from his apartment due to lack of rent payments on October 20, 2015. Jeremiah's landlord worked with Jeremiah's friends to arrange pickup of his belongings that day. The only clue that came from looking through Jeremiah's things was that the clothes he wore in the parking garage video were in his laundry hamper, on top of all the other laundry, suggesting that Jeremiah changed clothes at some point after 12:07 a.m. on July 22. No trace of Jeremiah Foco has ever been found. He is 6'3", approx 220 pounds, with brown hair and brown eyes. Random act of violence. A few weeks earlier on June 27, Benito Enriquez was beaten to death in front of the Uwajimaya supermarket, located in the same complex in Jeremiah's apartment. In the early morning hours of July 23, the day after Jeremiah's disappearance, Donnie Chin was killed by stray gunfire from a gang shooting only blocks away from Uwajimaya village. Both crimes remain unsolved. However, both of these victims were found immediately, as the ID is a very busy neighborhood. If Jeremiah Foco was the victim of a random crime here, why is there no trace of him? Suicide. Jeremiah wasn't found in his apartment, but is it possible he committed suicide outside of his home, as in the resolved disappearance of Cheryl DeBoer? It's possible that Jeremiah left his apartment sometime after 12:07 a.m. on the 22nd and drowned himself in Elliott Bay. But in that case, why would he pack up his laptop and take it with him to commit suicide sometime in the wee hours of the morning? Or, if he decided to go through with it after having gotten dressed and ready for work, as Ms. DeBoer did, why did no one see him? We're talking downtown Seattle at the peak of the midweek commute here. It's hard for me to believe that someone could jump off the pier without anyone noticing. Even if he escaped notice, is there somewhere he could have gone in this area of Seattle, where no one would have found him for over a year? Left of his own accord to start a life somewhere else. This was actually the resolution of a 2008 Seattle disappearance case. If so, why did Jeremiah make a deposit into his bank account on Tuesday night? Regardless of whether or not Jeremiah was the man in the bus station security video, do you think he was still alive at 7:02 a.m. on July 22?
Number 5.
On November 3, 2015, Deanne Hastings attended orientation at the Glendale Academy Cosmetology School. She returned home and left a note for her boyfriend, Mike Tibbetts, telling him that she had a good day and was off to the grocery store. Deanne never returned home and hasn't been heard from since. She left all her belongings behind, including her identification and money. After Deanne didn't return home, her boyfriend tracked her phone through GPS. He found her vehicle, along with her purse and cell phone inside, abandoned in a parking lot near the knitting factory. Her driver's license was found weeks later outside Sonnenberg's Deli on Sprague Avenue. The following afternoon, her credit card was used at the trading company on Inland Empire Way, not too far from her home outside Spokane, Washington. Surveillance video shows Deanne inside the store purchasing vodka and birthday candles. According to several witnesses, Deanne had asked for help before entering the store, claiming that she had been drugged and kidnapped. The police were called, and when the officer arrived around 12:30 p.m. an ambulance was already on scene. They spoke to Deanne for a while and decided to let her go. Deanne went inside the store, made her purchase, and was seen walking out of the parking lot towards a coffee shop. At that point the officer left. Later that afternoon, Deanne was seen on surveillance video walking with a man named Randy Riley and his friend by a nearby storage facility. When questioned, they claimed that they had met Deanne that day and had hung out with her for a couple of hours. They say that the last time they saw her was when they left her on the side of the road, about 300 yards from her home. She hasn't been seen or heard from since. A man later told authorities that he had given Deanne a ride to the trading company on the day she disappeared. He says she left her keys in his car, but that he did not know anything else about her disappearance. On November 12, Randy Riley, one of the men last seen with Deanne on the afternoon she disappeared, was caught on video using her card at a gas station in Spokane Valley. The next day he was seen again, along with two others, using her card at Winco. Riley admits that he used Deanne's cards without her consent. He claims that he saw Deanne walking on South Inland Empire Way on the afternoon of November 4. He claims Deanne was belligerent and that he ended up leaving her on the side of the road. He says that 24 hours later he drove back by that area and stumbled across Deanne's coat with her wallet inside. He claims that he threw her cards and ID out near the deli to make it look as if she was still walking around. He was arrested and charged with possession of stolen property and identity theft, and spent several months in jail before being released in September of 2016. Neither he, nor anyone else, has been charged in Deanne's disappearance. Deanne had dropped out of sight for a few days at a time before, but never this long. The circumstances regarding her disappearance remain unclear, and her case remains unsolved. If you have any information on Deanne Hastings' disappearance, no matter how small it may seem, please contact the Spokane Police Department at 509-456-2233 or the tip line at 509-242-TIPS 8477.
Number 6.
Samantha Sayers was last seen August 1, 2018, while on a solo day hike up Vesper Peak in the North Cascades. It was easy for fellow hikers to remember the young woman with the bald tattooed head and the wide easy smile. One saw her eating a sandwich. Another saw her descending the south side of Summit. But Sayers, 28, never made it home to her Belltown apartment. For 22 days, more than a dozen agencies and countless volunteers scoured the mountain's steep, jagged terrain. Helicopters clattered overhead. King County Search and Rescue conducted an air search using thermal imaging cameras. 3 K9 teams searched for her scent. Nothing more was found than a possible boot print. On August 23, 2018, the Snohomish County Sheriff's Office suspended the search after spending thousands of hours on Vesper. But Sayers' mother, Lisa, refuses to give up hope that her daughter is alive. Somewhere. "We're not searching the mountain," Lisa Sayers said Wednesday from her home in Pennsylvania. "We don't think she stayed on the mountain." The family has hired a team of investigators that has asked Lisa Sayers not share anything about what, if anything, they have gleaned. "I'm not going to say who we're working with," she said. "But we have not stopped. We still believe she is alive." Earlier this month, her boyfriend, Kevin Dares, held a service in her memory on the peak where she disappeared, and where officials determined there were 4 possibilities for mishap, all involving slips into an icy crevasse or into Vesper Lake. The service included the installation of an iron cross with a hammered metal oval inscribed with Sayers' name and birth date and the title Queen of the Stars. In a long post on Facebook, Dares thanked the 15 people who attended, some who flew in to remember their friend. Dares went on to describe how the two met on Tinder in 2015 and about Sayers' excitement about her work as a properties artisan at Seattle Rep and how driven she was in everything she did, cleaning airbombs, flipping houses, hiking and traveling. And he wrote about how hard people tried to find her, to no avail. "As we choose life, adjust to new realities and consciously put one foot in front of the other," Dares wrote, "we can also recognize that we never move on. We will forever carry Samantha within us, and through every step we take." Lisa Sayers didn't participate in the Vesper Peak service and has had no contact with Dares. "I don't want to talk about it," she said. "We don't care what the people there are doing." In June, Lisa Sayers' cancer returned after 11 years of being in remission. Through 6 chemotherapy treatments and facing 2 more, she hasn't lost the determination to find her daughter. "Just know that we won't stop until we have our daughter home, or we have DNA that will tell us otherwise," she said. "People tell me, you just need to have a funeral and move on, but I say no, we don't. Because there is truth out there. And we're going to get it."
Number 7.
On May 19, 2016, Logan and his grandmother were getting ready for their jobs when Logan started to talk to his grandmother about a bizarre subject. He had gotten really nervous and said he had an epiphany while he was driving around. That was the only thing she was able to get from him before she told him they could sit and talk about it in the evening after they had come home from work. She regrets brushing it off now and wishes she had sat and talked to him about it instead of waiting. That was the last time she spoke to Logan. Later in the evening, when Logan failed to return home from work, his grandmother decided to track his phone. She saw it had pinged near Olympia where his mother lived, and she thought he was visiting his mother. His grandmother called her, and he hadn't stopped by his mother's home that day. By May 20, Logan still hadn't come home, so his grandmother decided to call the police to report him as missing, but the Thurston County Police Department was closed for the weekend, so she was forced to wait until the following Monday on the 23rd to call back and file a missing persons report. While his grandmother said his phone showed he was with his mother, authorities claim he actually had been going the opposite direction as they traced his phone activity as going down towards I-5 heading south. His phone showed him driving up and down this road several times, though authorities don't know why he would be driving back and forth. On the day his grandmother had tried to report him missing, May 20, Logan's car, a black 1996 Chrysler Sebring, was found abandoned along a southbound lane of I-5 in Rochester, Washington. Rochester is about 20 miles south of Tumwater. His car was found with all of his belongings inside, such as his cell phone, wallet with his driver's license, and a few bags of food. On the 20th, the police also got several 911 calls around 2 p.m. of a black Sebring drifting across the lanes of I-5 between Tumwater and Maytown near the Milpitas 92. They said the car crashed into the center median, and a 6-foot-tall Caucasian man, with either brown or red hair, jumped out of the passenger side of the Sebring and ran towards the thick woods on the side of the interstate. Just that morning, a witness claimed to have seen Logan and 2 Caucasian men standing by his car that was parked on the right shoulder of the southbound lane on I-5 near exit 95. She said she saw the car in the same location on her way back home, but this time the hood was up. She gave a description of the men with Logan. One was 6 feet tall with a very thin build and with thin straight blonde hair and a bowl cut. He wore a too small tank top and very short jeans. The second man was also blonde, but had shoulder-length hair and was wearing a flannel shirt and jeans. A 2-mile search of the wooded area with cadaver and tracking dogs came up empty. They searched for 6 hours, but found no evidence of Logan or anybody else in the area. Later in the evening of May 20, a witness called to report a naked teenager in the wooded area near the interstate, but nothing came of this tip. Logan's uncle, Mike Ware, is a retired Thurston County sheriff and assisted in the search efforts for his nephew. He believes the half-sister's boyfriend may have had something to do with Logan's disappearance, but the authorities already ruled him out simply because he passed a polygraph test. Mike still believes he has something to do with the case. His case was shared on the investigation Discovery TV show Disappeared on April 8, 2018. His family also put out a $10,000 reward to anyone with information leading to a break in his case. They wish to tell him that he is welcome home anytime, no matter what happened. They also want to let him know that he can always call them to at least let them know he's okay, even if he doesn't want to come back home. Human remains were found in Longview, Washington. They were in the late stages of decomposition. Authorities are still working on identifying the body. Logan's family is awaiting the answer to find out if it's possibly him, although they know it's not a strong probability. The first theory is that Logan left on his own accord to start a new life. All his life he had only known one side, and as a biracial teenager, he had to deal with a lot of racial remarks and questions. After he finally got in touch with his black side of the family and began getting answers, he claimed to have had an epiphany. Nobody knows what this was about exactly, but it might have had something to do with his identity crisis he went through in late high school. The second theory is that Logan's disappearance could have had something to do with the drugs he was said to have been on. It was known that he had started smoking marijuana in college, but it was not known if he had done anything harder than that. Some people think that he may have owed someone money for drugs or had started getting into harder drugs and got a bad deal. They also think that, if he was into harder drugs, it may be a possibility that he overdosed. The third theory suggests that Logan may have had a mental breakdown after talking with his other side of the family. With the family drama that had been happening recently and the altercation with Chloe's boyfriend, that could have put more pressure on his mental state. He maybe had an identity crisis that sent him into a spiral, and while smoking marijuana that made him more paranoid would have made it worse. He also thought people had been watching him, especially through his bedroom window, and this could have led him to want to run away or end his own life. The fourth theory is that Logan ran into foul play. His uncle Mike still believes Chloe's boyfriend has some involvement in Logan's disappearance. Though the local authorities have already ruled him out as a suspect, Mike isn't convinced. Authorities also are unsure if the 2 blonde men were involved or if they know something about what happened to him. While working on other leads at the moment, they also think it could have been a robbery gone wrong or even an accidental death. If you have any information on Logan, please contact the authorities listed or send tips anonymously. Thurston County Sheriff's Department 360-704-2740.
Number 8.
On Wednesday, January 10th, Michael Dillard said he was having the best day of his life. According to his older sister Brittany Kraft, he'd hung out with a friend, gone to church, and was in a really good mood. The next day, Thursday, the good mood continued. He went to school and everything was fine, Brittany told us. He was being kind of obnoxious, but for him to be hyper and stuff is not unusual. Michael, 15, lived with his adopted mom and dad at their home in Calvin, West Virginia. Brittany lives just a few miles away and spoke to Michael almost every day. Friday, January 10th was no different in that regard. But when Michael and his mom came over after school, Brittany said his mood had changed. On Friday, when he got off the bus from school, he was in a weird mood, Brittany told us. He came over to my house and would hardly talk to me. He was acting kind of down. Michael and his mom left Brittany's and arrived back at their house around 4:30 p.m. After helping his mom carry some things from the car to the house, Michael ran behind the house. He didn't say anything, he just ran back there, Brittany said her mom told her. But he never came back. Brittany says her mom called her and Michael's dad to come over within a few minutes. By 5 p.m., they called 911 to report Michael missing. Sergeant Bruce Clendenin with the West Virginia State Police told us that officers responded to the Dillard's house right away. There was a storm coming, and they knew they only had a few hours until it was too dark to see. The temperature got to 22 degrees below zero that night, Sergeant Clendenin told us. It started raining really hard and it was foggy, Brittany said. We looked for him until 6 a.m. the next morning. In the weeks that followed, numerous dive teams, search crews, bloodhounds, and helicopters were dispatched to search for Michael, according to Sergeant Clendenin. They've all come up empty. We're going to widen the search again once the snow melts, he told us, adding that while it's still an open investigation, Michael is not considered an endangered missing person at this time. His jacket was found about a week and a half after he disappeared about 300 yards from the house, Brittany told us. It wasn't muddy, it wasn't ripped up. It looked like he had just taken it off. The jacket that was found concerns me, Private Investigator John Bonazzo of Bonazzo and Swesley Investigative Solutions told us. He's been working with the Dillard family, pro bono, to help find Michael. The jacket could have either been planted there later, because that area had already been searched, or there's also a phenomenon that occurs during hypothermia where people start to undress, because the body tricks you into thinking you're warm, he added. Private Investigator Bonazzo said hypothermia is definitely a possibility in this case, because of the harsh winter weather conditions of that night. Brittany said her younger brother Michael only had $2 on him. He did have a cell phone, but he didn't take it with him. Now, over 2 months later, Brittany says she and her family just want to talk to Michael. My family wants him to know we love him and we miss him, and we just want him to be okay, she told us. Michael Dillard is described as being 5'5" tall and weighing 133 pounds with brown hair and hazel eyes. He was last seen wearing a maroon t-shirt, blue jeans, and red shoes. He was also wearing a 3 silver cross on a silver chain. Private Investigator Bonazzo is offering a $3,000 reward for information leading to the safe return of Michael Dillard. If you have any information on Michael's whereabouts, please call the West Virginia State Police at 304-872-0800 or Investigator Bonazzo at 305-415-8920.
Number 9.
Bekime Becky Elshani vanished in Colorado Springs, Colorado during the early morning hours of March 29, 2008. The 22-year-old vanished in the midst of a volatile relationship with her live-in boyfriend Daniel Derrier. Becky and Daniel had recently reconciled after Becky briefly rekindled a relationship with her ex-husband Wesley Bartle. Her family members were unsure of why Becky would want to reunite with Daniel, as the two of them had both been arrested for assaulting each other during previous incidents. Becky actually had a case pending against Daniel at the time of their reconciliation. In January 2008, while Becky was dating Wesley, Daniel allegedly hacked into Becky's MySpace page and posted a nude picture of her. Becky pursued charges against Daniel, but then got back together with him a short time later. Daniel was scheduled to appear in court for those charges on April 1, 2008, just 3 days after Becky vanished. Becky was last seen by her family members on the evening of March 28, when she and Daniel went to her parents' home in Colorado Springs. According to Becky's sister Fatima Elshani, Daniel and Becky got into an argument at the Elshani home. Fatima stated, he started yelling at her. She kept saying she didn't want to leave. We kept telling her to stay, but Daniel insisted that she left with him. That was the last time I ever saw her. The final sighting of Becky was around 1:15 a.m. on March 29. She was in the 100 block of West Riccrimmon Boulevard. Becky has never been seen or heard from again. 2 days later, on March 31, 2008, police went to Becky's apartment to perform a welfare check. Upon approaching the residence, police heard gunfire. They entered the apartment and found Daniel dead from a gunshot wound. He had shot himself. Becky was still nowhere to be found, and there was otherwise no sign of a struggle at the apartment. Still, investigators clearly found it suspicious that Daniel took his own life 2 days after Becky vanished, and 1 day before he was supposed to appear in court for the charges from posting Becky's nude pictures on MySpace. Investigators searched Daniel's car and reportedly found evidence that indicated foul play was involved in Becky's disappearance, however they have not specified what exactly was found. Investigators did reveal that Daniel drove his car to a park in Teller County just hours after Becky was last seen. Unfortunately, though, a search of the park turned up no evidence. Daniel did not leave a note or any other evidence messages that indicated he knew of Becky's whereabouts. It is widely believed that Daniel killed Becky and dumped her body before taking his own life, however due to the fact that Daniel is deceased and Becky has never been found, investigators have been unable to verify this. Becky's case remains open today and a $5,000 reward is being offered for anyone with information on her disappearance. If you have any information that could help the investigation, please contact the Colorado Springs Police Department at 719-444-7595.
Number 10.
Daniela Jasmin Amaro, 29, has been missing since October 6, 2017. Family members last saw Jasmin at her parents' house in Denver, Colorado. Jasmin left the house at some point that day and never returned. She has never been seen or heard from again. The following day, Jasmin's car was found abandoned on the side of the road near the 215 Beltway in North Las Vegas, Nevada, an approximate 11-hour drive away from Denver. Once Jasmin was reported missing, investigators searched the surrounding areas near where the car was found. Unfortunately, no clues were found. Police departments in both Denver and North Las Vegas are investigating Jasmin's disappearance. Certain reports state that Jasmin is missing from Denver, despite the fact that her car was found in Vegas. Other reports state that she was actually spotted and wandering into the desert in Vegas shortly before her car was found abandoned. However, investigators were unable to locate Jasmin or any signs of her when they searched said area. There are very few details available about Jasmin's case, so it is unknown why Jasmin and her car ended up in Vegas, nearly 750 miles away from Denver. The link between Jasmin and Las Vegas is unknown. The tragic mass shooting during the Route 91 Harvest Musical Festival in Las Vegas occurred just 5 days before Jasmin's disappearance. On October 3, 2017, Jasmin shared a link to a fundraiser for the victims of the shooting. Her car was found abandoned in Vegas 4 days later. Due to all these details, it seems possible that Jasmin might have traveled to Vegas to help aid victims of the shooting, but none of this has been confirmed at this time. Jasmin's case remains unsolved.